With a slew of recent changes to LOTRO's overworld and starting experience, one wonders how inviting Lord of the Rings Online is to new players in 2023. Even larger channels like Nixium have taken positive notice. But is playing as annoyingly cumbersome as some complain, or is it a rich tapestry of finely woven threads of Tolkien magic? Let's explore Middle-earth as represented in Lord of the Rings Online, with fresh eyes, as if we've never played before, and enjoy a full-length podcast with a prolific LOTRO content creator and streamer whose name I will wait to try to pronounce for the first time while giving the interview. So, as spoken through the words of Gildor, an elf friend to Frodo, the wide world is all about you. You can fence yourselves in, but you cannot forever fence it out. Introductions play a pivotal role in setting expectations of any given experience. The first line of the Iliad sets the narratological focus on Achilles' wrath, and the Fellowship of the Ring begins with a festive party. The former explains the governing anchor of the heroic epic, and the latter contextualizes an apocalyptic journey in a dichotomy of celebration, ultimately a foreshadowing of the character's eventual fate. LOTRO thus needs to ensure that it introduces new players to the genre, to what makes MMOs unique, while simultaneously teaching MMO veterans what's special about itself. Instead of following in retail WoW's footsteps by replacing all introductions with a single version for each faction, LOTRO has chosen to keep all of its historical tutorials available, for good or not. I should note that information shared beyond this point could be interpreted by some as spoilers, so tread wisely. Lord of the Rings Online's newest edition expands its newbie experience, filling it to the brim with compelling world building, epic vistas, challenging overworld content, and captivating storytelling. However, hopefully, the new tutorial will be less awkward than Frodo and his companions leaving the Barrow Downs.
They were ready, packing their bags and lading their ponies. Their new weapons they hung on their leather belts under their jackets, feeling them very awkward.
Similar to Dragon Age Origins, the original tutorials for each race were not only unique, yet are woven together to contextualize the beginning drama, in pairs no less. Elves and dwarves, while experiencing their own tragedies, quickly find themselves mutually linked in a looming threat that began with a royal murder in days past. Hobbits and men find themselves in the middle of a betrayal, reeling from the effects of trust torn asunder. Generally speaking, each race has its own introductory sequence in which they encounter a member of the Fellowship. For example, as an elf, you meet Elrond, a dwarf, Gandalf, a man, Aragorn, and so on. Each sequence is fairly short and teaches players the basics of movement, combat, looting, equipping items, interacting with NPCs, and managing quests. Moreover, they are cinematic in nature and follow the Pope in the Pool principle, teaching you a mechanic through entertainment. The voice acting, when it happens, adds to the experience until it doesn't.
But surely it is nothing noteworthy, for this is the Shire, and it is rare indeed for any evil to touch this land.
With that said, each sequence teases exceptionally strong foes, foreshadowing adventures in your character's future. The experience is still reasonably entertaining, considering their age, and they get you into the game rather quickly. The dwarf and elven route will eventually lead to a culminating necromantic ceremony, whereas humans and hobbits defend an outpost against ancient threats of Mordor. However, if you roll a female human burglar, there's an audio bug that does not loop the footsteps evenly. Of course, as MMOs age, they introduce more races and classes. For each new race, a new introductory sequence has been added. Bjornings, shape-shifting descendants of Bjorn of the Anduin, begin in an idyllic village whose gentle routine of herding and gardening becomes threatened by a sudden invasion of pesky goblins. It's their very presence that attracts the attention of a wizard, who ties his mission with your fate. Somewhat oddly, you then appear in Archet, the outpost just mentioned earlier. This transition feels jarring, in part because you can quickly discern that the visual quality of the human and hobbit area is clearly outdated compared to the Bjorning sequence. But even worse is the High Elf introduction. It pains me to be this critical, as there was clearly a monumental amount of effort that went into its production, yet it fails to achieve its goal. While I extensively covered its problems in a former video, its ultimate issue is that it ironically highlights LOTRO's worst aspects: empty fetch quests, questionable pacing, and disconnected balancing. But there is redemption. Lord of the Rings Online's most recent mini expansion, called Before the Shadow, not only released an entirely new introductory sequence, but 2 new massive zones for levels 1 through 30. It's not only tons of content, yet it also brings this starting experience in line with the quality of later level ranges. It's the perfect summary of Lord of the Rings Online in 2023 from a newbie's perspective. An ordinary setting, complicated by extraordinary challenges. Through cinematic storytelling, you discover that the fate of Middle-earth is being shaped ever so slightly by your very actions. I should note that this footage was taken before landscape difficulty was adjustable. However, future content will showcase sky bombs from Sauron and ghosts so deadly that I joined the ranks. So let's see what it has to offer. Of course, prior to enjoying the new content is installing LOTRO. It's free to play, available via Steam or alternate clients, for example, One Launcher. As of the recording of this video, it stands at a very positive rating with nearly 18,000 reviews. According to MMOPopulation.com, it repeatedly has around 30,000 daily players, whose number doubles during the weekends. Creating an account is easy and takes just a few minutes. Next, you need to choose a server in which to play. LOTRO does not support mega or cross-server functionality, so any character created on a particular server will remain there. If you are keen on role-playing, roll tunes on servers tagged with either RE or RP suffixes that respectively mean roleplay encouraged or role-playing, demonstrating the intent of players playing there. Once logged in, the display is broken into 3 sections. On the left are your characters. The middle shows the selected character with the respective racial background. And the right shows options ranging from using the item shop to creating a character. Character creation is standard, yet potentially confusing because both races and classes can be behind separate or related paywalls. Let's simplify the situation by creating a human captain, both options available for free. Cosmetic options are reasonably robust for an MMO of this age, and Standing Stone Games continues to invest in updating the graphical fidelity of each race. Unless you are playing in a role-playing realm, feel free to name your character and give them a background of your choosing, irrespective of whether it's Tolkien-friendly. Notice the Change Tutorial button. If your race or class is eligible for another introductory sequence, then you can make that change here. In our case, we will pick Before the Shadow, since it contains the newest and arguably best Lord of the Rings Online newbie experience. Finally, click Enter Middle-earth. The loading screens typically have a mix of a sales pitch in addition to some helpful information. And puns. So, here comes the fun.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun.
Oh, wait, wrong song. Second.
Now let the fun begin. Hop along, my hearties, hobbits, ponies all. We are fond of parties. Now let the fun begin. Let us sing together.
Swanfleet was once home to 2 historically great cities, both of which now stand in ruins. Caras Celebrimbor, where once dwelt the Noldor, whose chieftain was the jewelsmith. Celebrimbor succumbed to Sauron's wrath and laid waste more than 4,000 years ago. Tharbad, once a proud city of the Dunedain, prospered in the Third Age, but fell into decay with the destruction of Arnor, and has been abandoned for nearly a century, since the floodwaters following the Fellwinter rose and toppled its mighty bridge. This complicated compilation of destruction and new beginnings is where adventures begin for those who select Before the Shadow as their introduction. The area is home to 7 settlements, 5 vibrant and full of life, 2 overran by the forces of darkness. Stretching from the Wadewater to western Eregion, the flora and fauna, both natural and opportunistic, lie in wait for the next victim or meal. While the vistas are many and beauty plenty, there is danger around every corner. Lore aficionados should note that while Mossword does not seem to appear in any records of Tolkien, Swanfleet does. So this area inevitably is prone to interpretive differences, since there seems to be little canonical details. Lord of the Rings experts are free to correct me. The small border village of Mossword is located not far from the broken bridges of the flooded Tharbad, but if any of its folk are descended from the proud people who conducted trade along the Grey Flood, they have forgotten it. Forgotten, too, are the dangers of the past. Mossward has been a place of peace for many years, and retired adventurers make their homes within its palisade along hardscrabble farmers and craftsmen, with mischievous children running through the lanes, getting up to trouble and chafing against their parents' commands and restrictions. Now, upon starting your adventure, you're greeted with a narrator. Let's listen.
Speak then of how you came to this place of safety, Rivendell, the last homely house east of the sea. But speak swiftly, before the shadows deepen. From where did your road lead?
The music is warm and inviting, and the world lush. The NPC straight ahead of you has a burning ring above its head, indicating it's a main quest NPC. We need to speak to him.
Welcome to Mossward, traveler.
I love the voiceover with the text overhead. It's easy to understand and naturally fits. The first tutorial teaches you how to move and navigate. I also appreciate the pointy finger.
I see Geralt is out and about. Why not introduce yourself to him?
You then need to enter a building that teaches you how to interact with objects and transition between zones. Two main characters wait inside, who begin to banter. The vocal quality is not terrible, although I will let you be the ultimate judge.
We don't see many adventurers in Mossward. I suppose Maneldir counts.
I am no adventurer, Scotty.
Well, what are you then?
I was a ranger. It is quite different.
Bah!
You wait until the dwarven blacksmith moves to behind the counter. He generously offers to repair your equipment. The interaction here teaches you how to loot. Hilariously, the so-called repaired equipment is still rusty. Regardless, now we must equip it. Push I as in Isildur to open your inventory. Regardless, when you right-click an item when it's in your inventory, you either use or equip it depending on its type. Feel free to ignore the celebration boxes in my inventory. These are leftover relics from when I logged in during LOTRO's anniversary celebrations over the years. But just as you begin your discussion with Manildur,
My chieftain Strider always said... What is that? The town bells! Something is amiss outside! Follow me, hurry!
we discover a goblin that is supremely proud of its own pyromancy.
Look there! We found the villain!
Time for combat. This is a lovely way to introduce players to warfare as it's contextualized beautifully, a mark the prior introductions miss. But the situation is still chaotic and unclear.
This goblin could not have set so many fires alone.
You then support Illyri, an introduction to group mechanics in LOTRO.
Did I tell you?
The culminating moment of the tutorial is now upon us.
Me too, Scardy. Come with us.
This scene introduces players to LOTRO's drama system, essentially cinematic moments. Moreover, you experience Dread, a debuff that bosses tend to inflict that reduces your character's HP, called Morale in Lord of the Rings Online, by a certain fixed amount. And after you defeat Mad Thrug, an oddly onomatopoetic name, the rest auto-magically backflop onto the ground. I'm being picky, yet upon reflection, the scene is unintentionally hilarious. After a brief discussion is shared amongst the townsfolk, the instance closes and you enter the shared world of Middle-earth. It's here that everything you just learned comes into practice within the context of LOTRO's open world. While you must follow the main quest line, you're free to speak with those with the shining ring to complete optional quests. Completing these contributes towards your deeds. This is a bit like Guild Wars 2's achievement panel, in which other activities can be cataloged and rewarded. For example, meeting important NPCs, discovering points of interest, or completing a certain number of quests can bestow additional rewards, namely premium LOTRO points, and Virtue, a type of alternate advancement in Lord of the Rings Online that begins at level 7. Moreover, a task board and collection box are near you. In most MMOs, mobs drop trash loot. In Lord of the Rings Online, you can turn these in, up to a daily limit, for additional XP and reputation with a local faction. Without spoiling too much, if you have seen Rings of Power, you may think the next step in the tutorial is derivative, and you are likely right. But it explains the strange presence of the White Hand Urukai. As you help the child, you learn how to use vendors, earn gear as quest rewards, and use more combat abilities. Thus, the trajectory of introducing players to systems is well contextualized by reasonable storytelling and exciting combat encounters. It's well done, and more importantly, does not feel like a tutorial, exactly how a tutorial should feel. Moreover, you eventually run into Mossword's Stablemaster. This NPC governs one of LOTRO's quick travel features. Yellow colored lines means they have not been unlocked yet. Swift travel is an instantaneous port, available if you're VIP or via other means. The standard travel will place you on a horse that will literally run you from this stable to theirs, which is quite relaxing and entirely fitting. Additionally, you will meet a supplier, an NPC that provides reagents for LOTRO's crafting. I should note that Standing Stone Games is beginning to implement some core changes to crafting, and a veteran can illuminate our understanding in the comments. Yet crafting in LOTRO is fairly standard. In short, after you have learned your professions, we'll cover how soon, you must equip that profession's crafting tool and activate the appropriate crafting bench. In our case, since we are refining ore, we need to equip Prospector's tools and use a forge. You need to refine base materials first, and then use them to craft the items you need. Typically, you will need a reagent or two from the supplier vendor too. What seems unique to LOTRO is that you can overlevel a given tier of gear that enables you to critically craft items. Players of EQ2's crafting system may find this familiar, and having such a system provides use for each gathered material looted in the open world. It's not as robust as Star Wars Galaxies, Final Fantasy XIV, nor Rhizome, yet it's decent at what it does. Plus, after you improve a crafting level, you're provided with a special little. Swanfleet begins to beckon your character, but before we get to that tale, let's turn our focus to an important content creator and regular streamer of Lord of the Rings Online, who has played since its release. I am so excited to announce the guest for this interview. Now, before we started recording, I asked our guest how to pronounce his name, and he's going to let me try to pronounce it correctly. So, one potential reading is Jin? Is that correct?
I wouldn't say that's the worst. It's not the worst I've heard.
It's not the worst.
It's
Okay,
actually
I'll
like
take that.
It's pretty close. I've heard people have called me Gyn and just all kinds of different ones. But it's really simple. It's actually just Gin.
Gin. Okay, so I was
yeah.
even overcomplicating it. Gin.
Nah, Jin is really close. A lot of people call me Jin as well.
Okay.
But the reason for having the name twice is really simple. When I first made my YouTube channel, someone already took Gin, and I was like, what can I be then? And just did it twice.
Hey, well, for emphasis.
So I just go by Gin.
Yeah, interesting. Is there anything in particular special about the name Gin?
The name?
Yes.
Nah, it's also a really straightforward story. Back at level 75 in the game, I had a hunter named Gind, so Gin with a D at the end. And when I started again around level 100, I needed a name, and I wanted like every character to have the same theme, and I just went with, my previous character was Gind, I'll just make them Gin. So when I made a Runekeeper, I named it Ginkeeper, and etc. And my lore master is named
more
organizational. My lore master is Gundalf, which I'm pretty happy about.
Yes.
And I have like my Bjorning is Winnie the Pooh, like Winnie the Pooh. Like there's a lot of puns in my names.
I love the puns. Oh, that's so funny.
And like my future class Mariner is going to be a Viking, because a Viking. Yeah. So I have a lot of like Brawlers, Hooligan, like a lot of.
Oh my gosh! Oh, I love it. Oh, I'm a sucker for puns. No, that's just
I
right up
love
my
puns
alley.
as well.
Oh, that is awesome. So let me open up with our first official question. Who are you, and why do you cover Lord of the Rings Online?
Excellent question. Who am I? I am simply Gin. And why do I cover LOTRO? I started playing when the game released, but back then I was really casual, didn't know much about MMOs. But I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, so being able to walk around in Middle-earth was really something I wanted to do, so I started playing the game. But I really got into endgame at level 75, And then when big battles came to the game, like 85, I kind of took a break until 100. And since 100, I've been playing ever since. And the reason for me covering LOTRO is basically I was playing the game a lot, and it was like this one day I was like, I want to know how to improve my characters. I want to know to see where I can get stats and everything. What stats do I need? But there wasn't really any sufficient place to get that, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it myself. So my love for the game is like the base of it all. And I started doing some YouTube, doing some little guides here and there, and I started streaming on Twitch, streaming gameplay, and I also created a Discord server. It's I basically cover LOTRO and created all this to help others get into the game, to have an easier time. And my philosophy with this is, if I can make someone else have a better time and be better at the game, then everyone will have a better time overall. That's pretty much it.
Thank you. That is admirable. So just to clarify, you played LOTRO when it first released, LOTRO Vanilla, right?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. So was it after the first expansion that you became interested in the more aspirational types of content?
Let me just give you my LOTRO backstory. So level 50.
Yeah, for sure.
Level 50. When the game released, I played it. Me and my brother. My brother, by the way, he's a pretty big streamer. Just a quick shout out to him. He's the Viper, plays Age of Empires 2.
Yeah, good deal.
You can check him out.
Yeah,
he's,
I love the game. Awesome.
Like one of the best players there. But me and him both loved Lord of the Rings when it came out. Like we watched the movies. I think I was 11 when it came out. I didn't know about Lord of the Rings until then. Yeah. But
no, same. Yeah, about the same age as well. Yeah.
I fell in love with the world and the characters. So me and my brother played. We just quested together. I remember us buying Mines of Moria in the store when it came out, like the retail, like the CD version.
Oh yeah, with the box. Yeah, the physical copy.
We played a bit. We made like the new character, like the new classes. Warden and Runekeeper were new. We played one each, and we played for a bit, but eventually it just fizzled away, and I didn't play again until level 75, and that's when I first got into raiding and endgame. But thinking back, I was kind of a noob still when I think back to how I played, and then I was like really hyped for level 85. I was like, oh, it's gonna be a Helm's Deep raid. There's gonna be all this, all that. But instead we got big battles, which wasn't really my type of gameplay. I didn't really enjoy it. So I kind of just fell away from the game for a good while, and I came back around level 100 when we went to Gondor. We got the Throne raid, Throne of the Dread Terror. One of my favorite raids ever, by the way. And I've been playing ever since, and now I play every class to a pretty high level. And since I play every class, I thought I would be a good candidate to do guides and stuff like that. So that's where I am right now.
Excellent introduction. What I'm so excited about is my prior interview with Aubrey, the weird one. And sorry, Aubrey, I'm trying to represent you correctly here. What I recall is that her gameplay experience on the experiential spectrum is on the more leisurely side. I believe that she hasn't raided, and in fact, I haven't raided in any MMO that I've ever played either. And so being able to ask you questions and garner your experience of the game from that point of view, I think is going to be really, really valuable. Now, you did mention that once you started playing epic battles, that your interest started waning. Interestingly, I have also researched people's opinion about that particular gameplay mode, and it has received mixed reactions. I admittedly haven't played a lot of it, but I'm curious from your point of view and your experience, why do you think that is?
Well, yeah, for me, I love playing my own class and using their kits to like play the game and beat challenges. And the thing about big battles, I like what they were thinking with it, but they made like a whole new trait line when you enter big battles, where you're an engineer, or you're like you can build stuff. I mean, I like that stuff, but it kind of takes away from your own class. You don't really play your own class to that extent. But I think big battles were they were a fine addition, but they came at an expense of typical raids, like classic raids, because they didn't do any classical instances or raids then. And instead, big battles were the end game. So you didn't get like the work as a team and beat mechanics and fight a boss. That's probably my favorite thing about LOTRO is like end game and raids and fighting, beating mechanics. I also really enjoy landscape and the stories. Like I like everything in the game. I'm not really much of a PvPer. I don't really go to the moors that much. And I wouldn't say I'm like I'm not really a role-playing person doing like the music festivals and that stuff. Although I'm completely neutral. I understand why people enjoy that side of the game. But that's one thing that's great about LOTRO. There's so many different things you can do. Like it caters to a lot of different play styles. You can play the game at your own pace. Don't have to get to the end game if you don't like that stuff. You can do whatever you want. So that's also part of why I love this game.
Yeah, to piggyback on that idea, in my prior coverage of LOTRO, and upon retrospect, I could have emphasized it better. It's one of the few MMOs that doesn't seemingly punish you as a player for not rushing to the end game. There's this natural type of gravity in the gameplay experience that more or less encourages you to enjoy the moment as it is, and that is a wonderfully refreshing breath of fresh air from a game design perspective.
Yeah, exactly. I when I stream, a lot of people ask me, should I play this game? I always say yes, of course, because I love this game. But also, I always tell them at least once with the character, even if you're an endgame player, you should level through the game normally and just enjoy the world for what it is. Like, the world in LOTRO is just amazing. It's true to the lore and everything. It's just, for such an old game, it's breathtaking.
It really is. Now, I'm curious, has your interest in Lord of the Rings eclipsed beyond the game itself? Meaning, at any point, have you also jumped into Tolkien literature at large, or is most of your experience with respect to Lord of the Rings mostly centered and orbiting around the MMO?
No, I'm also a book reader. I've read the trilogy. I've read the Silmarillion probably twice. Books, I think, maybe twice. And I've read The Hobbit. And I know about the unfinished tales and stuff like that. I want to get to it, but I really enjoyed Silmarillion. So you can call me a Lord of the Rings nerd if you want. But yeah.
Yeah, I read that over this past summer, and it was a lot of fun because in college I studied classical languages and literature, and all the different parallels.
So many great stories.
Yeah, totally. It was a lot of fun to interact with that. So what makes this even more exciting from my perspective is not only have you played LOTRO at the highest level from and by level I don't mean level 140, but in terms of skill and navigating the higher echelons of rating, but you're also deeply familiar with the lore, so you can also add some commentary and perspective on how Standing Stone Games has also interpreted Tolkien as well.
Yeah, exactly. I always say that Lord of the Rings got me to the game, but the game kept me there.
Yeah,
so
I like that.
The story is what brought me there, like the universe, but that also shows that the game is doing a good job. by keeping me there. Like, I'm not there just for Lord of the Rings. Of course, that's the main draw for me to get to the game, but I also think the game has done a good job just on the game side to make me stay. So, yeah.
That is a beautiful perspective. Typically, the next question I'm going to ask comes at the very end of the interview, yet this is, I think, a perfect moment to bridge to this question. So, you mentioned that Lord of the Rings brought you to the game, yet the game has kept you here. So, what about LOTRO should excite a veteran player to keep playing or to return if they've taken a break? Moreover, why should someone who's completely new to LOTRO even give it a try?
Well, like for one thing, there's active development, and the changes that are being done, I think, are really good. There's class work. Most of the recent class reworks have been really good. Most classes get more enjoyable to play. And yeah, there's a new class coming. There's a new expansion. There's plans for years ahead. So there's no reason to quit if you're a veteran, if you enjoy the game, if you enjoy the world. And for new players, why should you play LOTRO? It's just, especially if you have like interest for Lord of the Rings or you've seen the movies or anything, it's just such a great world. Like the world building by far is the best thing about this game. Like you can pretty much walk through the entirety of Middle Earth and just take in the sights. It's so true to the lore, and it's such a beautifully crafted world. That's like, I would always put the world building and like the world itself as the main drawing point for new players. And then they're also doing a good work with endgame.
Yeah.
And there's crafting reworks. Like they're doing good things for the game. So right now is a really good time for the game. New expansion coming towards the end of the year, a new class, a new landscape. We're actually going all the way down to Umbar, which is kind of like unseen lands in most of the lore. So it's quite exciting times for the game.
Interesting. That reply provides a dynamic contrast to my conversation with Aubrey, in which she vocalized a reasonable amount of trepidation regarding the re-announcement of the Amazon Lord of the Rings MMO that is now in reproduction or redevelopment. So, from your perspective, do you not have a sense to be concerned or worried for the future of LOTRO?
I think it's a natural thing to worry about, like a new modern game with the same universe coming. But I think LOTRO has a really loyal fan base. It's really true to the lore, and the company itself they've said that the development is not going to end even because of this game. They're still going to keep going. I would be lying if I said that I'm not going to play or try the new game. Of course I am. Lord of the Rings fan. I want to see what they can do.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll stop playing LOTRO.
Yeah.
But if the new game is really good, I will obviously play it and probably cover it in like videos and stuff. But I'm honestly not worried for LOTRO because of they have such a good base already with the huge world that they've created, and like I said, the game keeps me. Like the lore brought me in, the game kept me, and I feel like that's the case for a lot of people as well. And there's people have friends, etc. I'm not just gonna quit on LOTRO because a modern game comes around, and we'll just have to see how true they stay to the lore. Obviously, I feel like the new game is probably going to look great. I'm really looking forward to see how they build the world. But I am honestly not too worried about LOTRO. I still think it'll stick around. As a matter of fact, it might actually
Excellent, thank you.
It might benefit LOTRO that more people will get eyes on the Lord of the Rings universe, and probably they want to take a look at LOTRO. You never know.
You make a very clever point in that if someone is going to play Amazon's new Lord of the Rings MMO for lore, or a reasonable interpretation of Tolkien lore, then it very well may be functioning like Diablo 4 is for Path of Exile, in that if you're wanting a really deep, engaging, customizable ARPG experience, then you may not find that in the way that you initially thought in Diablo 4, but instead in Path of Exile. I also think about how Grim Dawn, another ARPG, has received a boon of players recently because of people's either disappointment or difference of expectations being met with Diablo 4. So circling back to LOTRO, you wonder if it's in fact to LOTRO's benefit that Amazon is going to release a competitor. If anything, it may spur the developers to invest even more, which would benefit the genre as a whole regardless.
Exactly.
Circling back to your comments, you made 2 points. The first was you indicated that class reworks in the past have been successful and more fun to play as a result of the developers taking a second, third, even a fourth look at the class from its inception. I'm curious if you have examples that come to mind for that. Secondly, you also mentioned crafting. I am wondering if you have any particular examples of what, as well, in terms of an issue in the system that existed prior, and then what the developers have done to remedy that system.
Yeah, so let me start with the class reworks. One really good example is the Captain.
Sure.
Captain has always been a really good tank. There wasn't really a big problem with that. But the Redline Captain, which is like the DPS support Captain, let's say like it is, they hit like a wet noodle. They did no damage. So the rework, Red Captain is in a great spot. Blue Line, which is their healing line, it's not really used that much, but it still got improved. But especially the red line was really successful. The Minstrel class, they used to have 3 lines, but now they're healer or they're DPS, and they're actually viable for DPS for endgame now. So really successful rework there for the Minstrel. And upcoming reworks, well, I should mention the Warden as well. Warden tanking is pretty much back to being good again. It's not really a meta yet, but it's certainly viable. Same goes for the DPS Warden. It needed a little bit of a boost, so it's in a good place now. And we also have upcoming Guardian and Bjorning reworks, and then Hunter and Loremaster later. And so far, I would say Captain was a great success, except for Blue Line, but there's already too many strong healers, so it's not really the rework's fault, more that the class is a bit limited. The Minstrel rework was a great success. Red and blue are both really good. And Warden, same thing, making blue viable again for tanking. A lot of people love to tank on their Warden. So a really good work with the classes. When it comes to the crafting, personally, I as someone who loves endgame, I love landscape, I love crafting. I want everything in the game to be integrated together. Like I want you to be able to kill something in landscape to use for crafting. I want you to find rare ingredients in landscape. So I'm really happy about the plans for crafting, making it, because crafting has kind of, let's say the last few level caps, crafting has been something where, okay, in new level cap, you craft, all right, your base armor and your base weapons and shields, etc. But after that, crafting is just like only for consumables. They're planning on changing that and making crafting more viable. And you mentioned the crafting events. So far on the test server, we've seen the first crafting event. And it's a forester event in Coombe, like just east of Bree, in the lumber camp there. A lot of people will be familiar because it's one of the early places you go as the Race of Men, if you play that. And it's basically a fun little event where you race against other players. So you get a forester stacks. Yeah, little mini game, I would say. And the higher you place, the more rewards you get. and then you can use those
Oh,
rewards. So
interesting.
you
So
can
there's a
get
little-
ribbons. That's the
Yeah,
the
interesting.
rewards you get. You can use those to
Yeah, I did not know that. That's
get
cool.
cool emotes and rewards, different types of rewards. And there's also like a legendary crafting tool you can go for. So they're planning to make that for, yeah, they're planning every profession to have one crafting event. So
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Orion, which is one of the developers, he had a stream where he talked about crafting. He kind of mentioned like a scholar event in Minas Tirith, like the libraries
lore
there.
friendly. Yeah.
Maybe a cooking.
That's awesome.
Yeah. He mentioned he had a dream that he's had for 11 years. He wanted to make a cooking event in the Shire. I forget, Mithril Chef, I think he called it, or something. Yeah, there's every profession is gonna have a crafting event, and they're gonna rotate. Let's say the Forester event lasts for 4 days, and then we get a new one, and they keep rotating. So I like it. It gives you something else to do other than the typical stuff, and more things to do in an MMO is just good for the game.
Totally. Yeah. So, have you personally experienced these events?
I have a video on my YouTube channel where people can look.
I will reference that.
So,
Okay, interesting. So, from an accessibility perspective, do you need to have a certain level in crafting, or
you can?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, all you need is you just need to be a forester. That's it. Any level. Any crafting level.
Oh, so it's very accessible, even for almost newbies.
You just train for it, and then you can do it. It's open for any players, high level, low level. It's just a fun little event that you can go to, and it's basically a little mini game where you chop some wood, you refine it, then you gather some bear hides, you refine it, then you drink some mead, and then after that you run with what do you call it? A camber or like a big log. I forget the name. Big log that you balance, and you run a little course, and that's the finish line. And fun little event. It's gonna come with the update 37 update. Should be at the end of August sometime. So far, it's only been on the only been on the test server so far, and that's where I tried it. And I did a little video. I usually cover when there's like a beta test for LOTRO. I like going there and covering everything that's new. That's one of the, like, my YouTube channel is, I would say it's mainly news and coverage about the game, coupled with some like guides now and then. Like the legendary item system that they introduced was a really it was a really big rework, so I think guides are really helpful for that, and just guides for anything else, and occasionally gameplay. Yeah.
Interesting. So, taking this point of discussion a little further, in my most recent video, there was quite a bit of discussion in the comments about the efficacy of the legendary item rework. Now, I'm curious to learn your perspective in terms of where they made improvements, but also where they fell short in their redesign of that system.
The legendary items are a really hot topic between players. It comes up often in my Discord server. It's also been like a little sticker made called Delete Allies in my server, because a lot of people they think they're like a little bit problematic.
Oh man.
I think for sure the new system is better than the old one, but it still has some flaws for sure.
Interesting. Okay.
Because there's different types of people who don't know the system. There's like, you can put, they're called traceries. You can get traceries by playing the content, and then you put them onto your items, and that makes your items stronger. And you kind of need to work and like gems that you put on your weapons.
Something in like a Diablo game.
And you kind of like work then to upgrade those gems and make them more powerful. But the problem is, I'm not going to go too deeply into the allies, but there's one category called Words of Power. That's one type of traceries that basically are percentage of AoE damage, single target damage, bleed damage. So you kind of have to pick, because you get 5 slots, you kind of have to pick what you want. You can also increase your AoE targets. And there's a problem there, because sometimes you do want AoE damage, sometimes you want single target damage. And you kind of have to pick what you want. You can't really switch freely. I really wish they made it so you had a pool of traceries where you could switch freely between, but you're kind of locked into whatever you put on your allies. And if you want different kind of builds, there's a lot of work needed, because you need to make several allies that you can swap around. So there's certainly some limitations to the allies, and but overall I think the new allies are pretty good for what they are. Although personally I miss getting that really rare weapon drop from an instance. But right now we don't really get weapon drops because we have our allies. But overall, I think before legendary items were a thing, you could get really shiny weapons, cool loot.
Something that were conventional in the
But I understand that. Yeah, but allies are there to stay. There's no doubt about it. So instead of thinking back, we should just look forward, and hopefully they can improve on the system. But I don't really have big problems with it. It's more if you're playing at endgame and want to min-max for different situations, that's when it gets tedious. But if you're just a normal LOTRO player, the average player, then I think the ally system is perfectly fine.
Fascinating. It reminds me of when I occasionally play Path of Exile, and you have a map clearing build, but the moment you encounter a boss, then you swap out that attack gem for a single target variant.
There you go. It's a good example.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think what you mentioned there is 2 clicks and swapping around. That would be the perfect solution, in my opinion. Giving you a pool of traceries that you can freely swap between.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes.
That would be the optimal solution to it.
Okay, I now mentally have a picture of what you were describing there. Okay, cool. So we're on the same wavelength. Okay.
Yeah, for example, if you have 5 slots total on your 2 allies for Words of Power. If instead you just had a pool of 10 traceries where you could switch freely, then that would solve a lot of the issues people have with it currently.
Interesting. Cool. Hopefully a developer is listening to this. Although I'm guessing this idea has already been posited to them. But no, that makes sense. It seems like an elegant solution that resolves one of the bigger use cases for it. So awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Super cool. Thank you so much for that illustrative response. So with respect to where you've been talking about the pros and cons of the LI, the legendary item system, if there is anything you would change about LOTRO, what would it be? And I purposely kept this generic to give you the widest amount of possibilities, but if you wanted me to segment it into specific elements, I can do that as well. But I'm curious if there's one pain point, one thing, if you had a magic wand to fix, what would it be about the game?
To fix, I mean, that's really easy. It's to make the game lag free, because there's still lag to some degree, but it's definitely getting better, I would say. I'm thinking back a couple of years back, it was pretty bad at times, but now only occasionally I will get bad lag. It's not really a problem that irritates me anymore. And they're doing fixes, and they're always looking for ways to improve the lag. And I would say I don't really even think about the lag anymore. But while before would be please don't lag today, please.
Sure.
But now it's oh, it lagged a little bit. But so, I mean, obviously that might be a different experience for different people. I know in the MMORs, where people play PvP, player versus player, or player versus monster player. Let's be correct.
Fair point.
It can be worse. But yeah, if we're just forgetting about the lag, which is it's the obvious one, one thing I really would do about LOTRO is scaling the old instances, because there's so many great instances that are just stuck at like level 50, level 75, like Tower of Orthanc, level 75, Throne of the Dread Terror, level 105, and like stuff like even like the Six Man's way back, like Karn Doom, like the Rift Raid. I'm sure people would love that to be scaled. And currently in the game they have
to the current max level.
Yeah, brought up to current level. Yes, exactly. Because there are plenty of non-scalable instances in the game that are just stuck in the past and forgotten about. There's currently a feature in the game that's called featured instances, where there's like a rotational weekly, or it changes every week, I believe, and rotates between instances where if you do those on that day, you can get extra rewards. I would love to see a featured classic instances being added to the game and maybe rotated, like the older content. So many people have nostalgia, and there's like, even to today's standards of raids, there's so much good content, it's just sitting there not being played, and I just wish they would do something about it. But I understand that there would probably be work needed for that. Maybe they don't have the manpower to do that, but it's something that I would love, and I feel like a lot of people would also love it. But that's probably the one thing I would change that comes to my mind, except for the lag.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned, and maybe I'm reading into this, so correct me if I'm wrong. I seem to recall you saying that there were certain instances that do not scale. Does that imply that there is another type of instance that does scale?
Yeah, you have a select few instances that every level cap they will scale with the cap.
So presumably
like
there's technology that exists. The question is bridging that back.
Yeah.
Okay, fascinating. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
For sure. Like, for example, the people who played Lord of the Rings back in the day will know the first instances you can play, the Great Barrow.
Yep.
They're scalable. That's a good example. The 6 per 6 months you can play, they're scalable. So they can definitely do it. But I think they got asked before, and there would be a lot of work getting the correct numbers or something. But I wish they would do that. That's like one of my biggest dreams.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Especially because they do have a few that do scale. So you wonder if there's like math agnostic math that they can. Well, apparently it's not that simple. If they've said, "Hey, this is a gargantuan task," but at least it exists there as a reference point for, "Hey, you've done this before. We'd really like it if you could do it again." So, okay, that's cool. That's interesting. That it's more of a server-side lag issue that comes to mind for one of the things to fix, and also making old classic content available and relevant for the in-game as your other request to change. Meaning, and correct me here if I'm reading into this too much, it's not like there's a specific feature or there is a particularly bad mechanic that drives you nuts. It's more, hey, these are elements that, like, the game as is, when it's working as it's intended, it's actually great. Here's just a couple elements that we could that the developers could invest in to elevate the experience, but nothing comes to mind that's just straight up broken or nauseating to deal with.
Not really to me. I would say I'm more positive than most people when it comes to like systems like this. Like, a lot of people have problems with the virtue system that they reworked a couple of years ago. I personally don't mind it. I know you need to do a lot to improve the virtues, but I don't mind having a long grind like that. What was I gonna say?
Yeah, the virtue system, I don't remember. I must have played it before, very casually before the rework. The new system, at least from my perspective as a very casual, mostly outsider, it seems reasonable. Like, it seems like it's aspirational, and it feels nice when you actually do get another level up in a given virtue. It feels like a alternate advancement system, like an early EverQuest or something. So from my limited,
that's exactly what it is.
To me, it feels like it does what it like it's an optional system. It seems, now correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the stat boosts are on the marginal side. Like, I don't know if there's any battle I've ever been in that, oh, because I had this virtue, I lived. Now, probably at the rating level, maybe it does become that important. But it seems like it's a nice secondary system that for people who do want to do all those additional deeds, or they want to do all the I'm forgetting offhand, there's a couple different ways to earn virtue experience. This is another way for them to engage in the world. So to me, it actually fits nicely based on my experience with it.
Yeah, it's definitely an improvement on the older ones. The older one, I think like the max level was 20 on a virtue, and you would have to do a specific deed to get a virtue level on that virtue. But now every deed that you do it just gives you virtue XP, and you can select which virtue you earn. But like you said, in the end game, that's when you really want the virtues for min-maxing, and the higher you get, like the closer you get to capping a virtue, the more or the higher the numbers will give. And some people have a problem because it takes a long time to max them out, and they want to max them out fast. And sometimes you also want to have, like, because you have 5 slots for virtues, sometimes you want to have, let's say, 7 or 8 that you want to rotate depending on the content you're running. So a lot of people don't like the grind, and there's also like a passive increase for every single virtue. So maxing those out will give you some more morale and some more physical mastery for your damage.
I did not know that.
So there's definitely a benefit of maxing it out. So one thing that people are actually doing, there's a level boost item called Valor, they're called Valor. People will buy those just for the virtue XP bundles that are in them and use them to boost their virtues.
Interesting.
So people are kind of speculating that SSG is aware of this and know that people are buying them for this this reason. And it's kind of like a little conspiracy thing going on.
I mean, I guess in principle, it's no different than if you buy a Valar to gain levels. It's really no different than buying levels in Virtue. But I can see why it could feel like Cloak and Dagger. But anyways,
But yeah, that's like the shortcut to increasing them that people use.
Okay, I could see. Yeah, because I guess the difference with the Valar is from a level perspective, it will either how do I say this? It's not like it gives you raw experience. It simply moves you up to the level of the Valar, right? Versus the Virtue experience, it's just flat experience that you can continually reuse on the same character. Is that the idea of how it's used?
Yeah, so the Valor item brings like so if you make a new character and you buy the Valor, it'll always take you to 10 levels below the level cap. So right now we're at 140, so the highest Valor will take you to 130. But there's also like basic starting gear to get you like situated, and there's also virtue XP bundles, and you can send those to your other characters. So people will just level a character up to level 5, get through the intro, and then buy the Valor and basically use it and send the virtue XP to the character they want.
Gotcha.
So they're basically using that tune to boost their main tune.
I see. Okay, it'd be interesting to get the developers' official perspective on this, because to your point, people are doing it, and that probably is the unintended use for it. So that's an interesting problem. You presume that
that's a common thing. Like you'll hear people be like, "Oh, my virtues are so bad," and someone will be like, "Oh, just buy a Valor," and you're all set. You know?
So, interesting. So it's somewhat common knowledge to utilize them for that purpose. So not.
For sure.
So it's really not really a level boost for most people. It is a Valor boost.
Exactly. Like a
thank you. The virtue boost. Oh, that's so funny. Oh, that is so hilarious. Yeah, the things you learn. No, thank you so much. That's really insightful. So I'm curious. We've kind of jumped back and forth with this topic a little bit here and there. Just throwing you a softball here. What's your favorite feature of LOTRO? I know you've mentioned quite a few things you like. If there's one that stands out, one that,
I mean, that's easy to me. It's the landscape, the world itself. It's I love the world. I love Lord of the Rings, so it's probably more special to me to get to see the world and with my own eyes, live in it, walk around in it. They do such a good job creating the landscape. And like I said, for such an old game, the game looks beautiful on high graphics. I also would mention I like the combat system, the skill system in LOTRO. I haven't really played World of Warcraft, but I've seen like when you use a skill, everything goes on cooldown, and you wait like a second and use another skill. LOTRO has unique skills with different cooldowns that you have to think about how to use it. And I also like the defined roles in the game. You have roles that are purely tanks. You have healers. You have like the lore master, which doesn't really do damage. It just supports the group, enables the group. I love the defined roles that you have in the game. So I would say landscape is number one for me, but I also like the combat and the classes in the game.
Yeah, in my prior coverage, I led with the same exact opinion that the landscape, the virtualization of the Tolkien world, that's what struck me as one of the most definitive reasons why someone should at least try Lord of the Rings online. It's absolutely, it's almost, English almost fails to have the vocabulary. And I realize I'm kind of hyping up here, but I was legitimately surprised at how, even like you said, for an older title, I would call it a masterpiece with respect to the landscape.
Oh, for sure.
I was legitimately surprised by that. Now I'm curious, you did mention combat, in one particular element of that was the interaction between skills. Do you have an example or a story of a raid or an instance in which that particular interaction was important and why that is representative of kind of the unique combat components of LOTRO?
A specific example. Think of it.
Or if you wouldn't have brought in, I was just curious if there was a memory.
Yeah, but I see what you mean.
Because as you're thinking about it does remind me of, I've probably played 95% of any MMO that's ever come out ever. Maybe 90%. But anyways, like WoW's combat, for me, feels pretty stale. Now, admittedly, I'm talking about retail WoW.
Yeah.
Classic WoW, I actually thought has very dynamic combat. Guild Wars 2's is very fluid, though to your secondary point, even though the specialization system added kind of pseudo roles, everyone can kind of do a little bit of everything, especially depending on the type of content you do. I mean, I guess you do have the Dragon Hunter that can be the healer, but it's very open-ended in terms of what people can do. And my first MMO was Classic EverQuest, in which by and large you had a role to do, and if you deviated from that, then your group paid the price. So you very quickly learned that I have a job to do and I need to do it well. So it's fun to hear from your perspective that in LOTRO it sticks true to that iconic D&D class fantasy of, not that there are classes that can do more than one thing, but if you want to, how do I say this, that the game does select for role-based combat.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things about LOTRO that I love. Like I said, we have your classic DPS roles. You have like your hunter that shoots your bow and you deal damage, but you have these unique classes that supports the group.
I love support classes.
All these different cooldowns on like different duration on when they're back off cooldown. You really feel it when you combine the cooldowns at the correct time. Like if you have a lore master that supports the group and you have a lore master that doesn't support the group, you will feel it so much. It's not like you can just bring a DPS and a tank and a healer and you'll kill the boss. If you have good support, like a red captain who knows how to apply their buffs and use their buffs for the group at a good time, coupled with the lore master who knows to get their debuffs on the targets at the right time, you just really feel it in the game. That's something that I really enjoy about the game, that you have different types of roles. It's not just tanking, healing, and DPS. There's more, there's a support element to it that I really enjoy.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of my modern laments for the MMO genre is the trend to remove support as an actual functional element of combat. And I remember playing, like I said, early EverQuest, Ultima Online, in which having, to your point, a capable support party member was the difference between success and failure. Having, like an early EverQuest, a really skilled enchanter was often the difference you needed, or in like UO having like a talented bard. And so it's really exciting for me to hear, because I haven't fully, I'm still kind of working my way up through the levels. It's fun to be able to expect being in groups with these hopefully capable individuals, and being able to feel that difference, and how the developers have made that a rewarding experience in itself. That if someone is capable at their, there's a skill, how do I want to say this? It's not like skill has been neutered out of the game, but the game actually rewards clever use of the knowledge of the combat mechanics. So that's exciting. I'm glad you highlighted that.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Now I'm curious. This is kind of meta, but in terms of Standing Stone Games as a developer, what do you think their biggest miss has been? Because you've played when it was released under Turbine, and you played through at some degree during the transition, which was a couple years ago at this point. I forget when. So since it's transitioned from Turbine, what do you think Standing Stone Games, what their biggest mistake has been? Or maybe it could be a missed opportunity, something that you look back and you think, man, they really could have hit a home run, but instead you're still kind of reeling from the consequences.
That's actually a pretty easy one. I think overall SSG are really great for the game. They're doing really good job development, but they did a really, let's call it a mistake during this level cap, level 140.
Okay.
So thinking back, when did Gundabad come out? That's the last expansion we had. I believe it was October 2021.
Oh, so almost 2 years ago. Okay.
Yeah, almost 2 years. So they've actually, the executive producer was on stream, and he admitted to it that they made a really big mistake where they omitted the end game for too long. Okay. Honestly, because on release we got the typical couple of 3-man instances, and we got a 6-man, and we got our raid. But since then, it took so long until we got new end game content. Instead, they did a lot of older zones, lower level zones, and they kind of just forgot about the end game. And I think it took. We got update 36 this year, probably 3, 4, 5 months ago. That's when we got our, it was almost a year and a half before we got new content for endgame. So at least they admitted to it, and they gave us really good content just recently. We got a new raid, got some new 6-mans, 3-mans.
Is that coming up in update 37, or was that a update, or was that the Gondor update?
No, 36 was the later one where we got a new instances.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And new raid.
Cool. Awesome. And that was after Before the Shadow,
it was
right?
too long.
I'm trying to put my timeline together.
Yeah, after.
Okay,
Before the
gotcha. Yep.
Oh yeah, Before the Shadow as well. That was cool and all, but it was nothing in game.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep.
Except for there was a 1-6-man with it and a skirmish or something, but it's not enough, and they've admitted to it, and for the future, I think they'll do better with it.
Okay, so content drought and a misprioritization, or maybe just an imbalance between updating some lower level experience, but also making sure that your most dedicated players have things exciting to look forward to in the near term.
Yeah, just a lack of end game for too long. Basically.
No, that totally makes sense. So,
for level cap players.
Yeah, for sure. In level cap, is that 140 right now?
Yeah,
okay,
140.
Gotcha. And has that been the case since the expansion almost 2 years ago?
Yeah, Gundabad increased from 130 to 140. Okay. And towards the end of this year, we're going to go from 140 to 150, I believe, with the Umbar expansion.
Okay. This is a tangential question, do you feel like LOTRO would benefit from a stat squish?
Oh, for
and
sure.
A level squish. I should kind of lump those together.
Yeah, level squish, stat squish is coming with update
I did
37.
read that. I'm excited to see. Yeah, because
that's towards the end of the month, like I mentioned before. I am tired of looking at tanks with 3 million morale.
Right? It's so unrelatable.
With over 1 billion morale. Yeah. This boss has a 1 billion morale. Okay.
Right. It's like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, they're exactly. Every number is going to come down by, let's say, if you have 1 million morale, then you're going to have 100,000. So 10% of what you currently have. And I'm also tired of looking at my stats and having like 1 million tactical mitigations, 1 million.
It's so outrageously high that it almost loses its meaning. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really a problem. Like it's just extra decimals.
Yep, sure.
It's just harder to look at. But now it's going to go down. Instead of having over 1 million critical rating, you're going to have like 60,000. It's just going to be nice to look at.
Totally.
So the stat squish, very welcome. Everyone's fine with it. Everyone welcomes it. And level squish, a lot of people want them to do that because 150 levels is a lot. Although we have the Valors, it's quite a lot of levels to level up through. So I would love to see a level squish, but currently they've said it's not something they'll do short term, but maybe long term. But stat squish, very welcome change, and I think everyone's happy about it.
Awesome. So curious, you very quickly isolated what their biggest mistake has been in terms of the content drought. Curious what your thought is on what's been their greatest decision as a developer or something related to Standing Stone Games.
Well, you mentioned the stat squish. That comes to mind right away. But just in general, I wouldn't say like one great decision, but just investing in the game and the improvements they're making to the game is just really great for the game. I mentioned the class work, how great they've done with the class reworks, and every class is going to get a fix up going forward. I mentioned there's like 4 classes coming up, and eventually they'll touch on every class. I think overall the Virtue rework, the Li rework, what they did has been good for the game. And I mentioned the crafting rework they're doing is good, and they're always trying to fix the lag. At least they're saying that. And also there's like a VIP buff if you're a VIP, which means if you subscribe for a month instead of being a free player, you can go to a person in game, get your VIP buff that lasts for 14 days, and you basically have an item with you that you can like open the auction hall, you can open a shop, you can open your vault. Basically like an item.
I had no idea.
Like a multi-use
item. I have
item.
subbed in the past, really but I had no clue this benefit existed.
And you also, get an item that makes your equipment take no damage when you die, so you don't have to repair if you have this. So just a really nice quality of life change.
Yep.
And I just came to mind something I was going to mention before.
Yeah, go ahead.
But I'm happy they stopped the work on War Steeds, because War Steeds is one of the worst things they ever added to the game, in my opinion.
And you're not alone.
I don't know if you're familiar with War Steeds.
So, not to cut you off at all, but I've read so many negative comments. And so it was last year during the 15-year anniversary, I was given a Valar, like a level 115, I don't remember, 110 or something. And so at that point, they did give me a War Steed as a result of having that boost. And I remember thinking, okay, like, is it really that bad? Like, is a whole collection of people missing something? And nope, it is particularly horrible. And what's odd to me is, if there's probably more things to it, but like what I immediately noticed is that the controls for the horse are completely different than the controls for a standard mount. And so like one feels like it's tactile, it's like hugging the ground. The other one feels like it's like almost like riding a 4-wheeler or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, good. The other one is like a jet ski, like sliding around, and it feels very unnatural. And so it's very, very interesting to me why they chose to use a different controller for the War Steed. versus using just the default, mount logic. I'm sure the issues go deeper than that because I tried doing some combat and it was just really, really awkward. So I just decided to hop off my horse and fight normally. But anyways, I'm just speaking from my experience trying out the system for like 10 minutes. And I was like, oh, shoot. Like I couldn't imagine this being like the fresh content for the whole expansion and then having to like slog through it. So that was just my experience. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off, but it did remind me of a pretty poignant memory.
No, you described it really well there. It's just easier to jump off and fight on foot than it is to fight on a war steed sometimes. Like, the idea was really great. Like, the war steed arrived to the game when we got to Rohan. So it's kind of the idea of, we're on these big fields where you can ride across with a fast horse and you can battle on horseback. Like, the idea was really good, but it ended up just being like really hard to control and sometimes really glitchy when you get to like different elevations. Like, you would ride for 10 seconds forward and then slingshot back because the game, I don't know, it's just really weird. But for the longest time, there's no plans to do anything with war steeds, which is great. The only usage people have now for war steeds is to ride faster on landscape. If you want to get from A to B fast, you just get on your war steed and just ride there.
Because the max speed for a war steed has a higher potential than the max fixed speed of a normal mount, right?
Yeah, I would say, like, if we say the normal mount is 100%, then maybe the war steed is like 150.
So that's a significant number, especially if you have to travel a long distance.
Yeah, it's way faster.
Yeah, gotcha.
Sure.
Interesting. So what's cool about your reply, and I think this is actually a notable strength, it's not like they only hit one home run and then the rest of the time they were horrible. It's they've consistently shown a history of making improvements. Now, maybe the improvement wasn't to the extent that the community had hoped for, but over time they've made enough right decisions to instill confidence that they're at least bringing the game in a good direction, and it's not a one-off exception.
Yeah, for sure. I look more at the intent than the results, because the results aren't always going to be perfect, but I if I see that the intent is there to improve the game and not just like make something to make money for that pure reason, like the crafting rework, I see the intent behind it and I'm fully supporting what they're doing. Class reworks are really great. I think just the intent for their changes is just good, and that's something that I support.
I appreciate that reply, and someone who's speaking from an American perspective, I think my culture could do a better job of being a bit more lenient, tolerant, and forgiving, especially with respect to intent versus simply what the final product was. So I definitely appreciate your I mean, it's beyond generous. It's a very human way of approaching it that I think is really healthy. So I appreciate that. One last question, and then I'll actually end with one follow up. But the last main question is, I'm curious from your perspective, how effective is LOTRO's monetization strategy, not only in terms of keeping players playing for a long duration, not in terms of session, but being a subscriber or buying expansions as they come out, but also with respect to the value for what the game costs, whether that's free or whether that's a subscription. But also curious your perception. I'm sorry, I'm layering like 3 questions onto this. Your perception on, or your perspective on the perception of LOTRO's monetization strategy. Because what's really fascinating is when I talk to people who play LOTRO, they overwhelmingly say how generous of a fiscal model it is. But when I talk to people who either haven't played or they haven't played in a long time, or maybe their source of information is simply different, there can be a very critical view of how aggressive LOTRO's monetization is. So that dichotomy is so fascinating to me. So any insight into any of those layered questions? And again, sorry for throwing 3 at you.
No, that's fine. I personally don't think they're aggressive at all with their monetization. The game is free to play up to an extent. I think they made a lot of zones up through the levels free for new players. Of course, you can buy VIP to get some benefits that you don't as a free player. Like, I'm personally always VIP because it's mainly for the item I talked about.
Sure. Yep. The no damage to items.
Access to everything
totally.
and no damage. Which is really helpful. But also, like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, all right, I'm getting this item, but I'm also supporting the creators of this game because I love the game. You can also perfectly fine play the game for free. You don't have to pay. Like, if you sub once, you unlock a lot of perks that you'll have forever. So I think their monetization is pretty good. Obviously, with the game being free to play, they have a LOTRO store that you can buy a lot of perks if you want, cosmetics. Like, that's one of the ways they earn their money. But they also charge for the expansions. So let's say every year or so, there's going to be like an expansion that you can pay
Which
for.
is pretty typical in the genre. Right? Like, WoW, Guild Wars 2,
sure.
you have to buy it. Go ahead.
Yeah, and typically when there's an expansion, there's going to be a cheaper option, like a medium option, and an expensive option, and with different types of rewards. So if you're like just playing the game to play the game, you can just buy the cheap option and get the base things that you need. The more expensive ones typically have like maybe a valor boost and maybe some cosmetic items and a horse, like stuff like that. But I think overall the monetization for LOTRO is pretty good and pretty fair. Like, the amount of content that you get from LOTRO, if you want to be a free player, is incredible. So I think overall the monetization is fair for this game, for sure.
Do you think that they have missed the mark with respect to marketing their model accurately due to the prevalence of an opinion that in fact it is too aggressive, or it is too parasitical, or that it is too money hungry? Or do you think that's going to be innate in the niche genre of MMO gamers in general?
That's a good question that I'm not completely sure about. I'm not exactly sure like how they market their game, because I'm not like discovering the game like, oh, what is this game? How do you pay? Because I'm already in it. But I mean, it's free to play. I think I've seen like on their website like play LOTRO, it's free to play or whatever. But overall, my opinion on the monetization is that it's fair for sure. You get more than your money's worth if you play this. You don't have to get the big, like the expensive ones. You can just buy the basic one and still play the game for fun.
Awesome. Yeah, that correlates with my experience as well. I personally have not felt like LOTRO's monetization model has been, how do I say? I guess I've felt way less negative feelings navigating through its store than like Black Desert Online, or I mean, even like World of Warcraft. You pay a subscription, there's still an item store, or there's still a premium shop, whatever, however they call it. I don't remember. Now it's apples to oranges, but no, I hear you, and that's been my experience as well. So the last question, it's open-ended. Is there anything you would like to add? Has there been any memory that's popped into your head that you wanted to share, but we kind of moved past that?
I think we covered a lot. Nothing really comes to mind.
I definitely appreciate your time and your willingness to talk with me, man. Definitely appreciated. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more MMO content.